Before we start chatting about AWS config, let's take a few steps back and recollect few terminologies from ITIL. ITIL is Information Technology Infrastructure Library. In that, we have a module called as Configuration Management, which states that every resource that you own and provision is called as an asset. That asset is also called as a configuration item or a CI. In AWS or in any other cloud, this definition doesn't change. Every configuration item or asset changes its parameters and configuration based on various things like auto scaling, performance management, etc. And it is paramount to record such configuration changes or configuration history in some kind of a database. And you do that so that you can go back in time and see how the resource configuration looked like at any point in time in the past. With AWS config, you can do just that. You can store the history of all the information of your asset or the configuration or let's say resource in your S3 bucket where you configure. Let's understand this with an example. So let's say if there is a new Amazon EC2 security group and that is associated with an Amazon EC2 instance, then the AWS config records the updated configuration of both the security group and the Amazon EC2 instance. Let's talk about this with a scenario where you have hybrid model and you got resources on premise as well, or maybe in another cloud. With AWS config, you can record software configuration changes not just in AWS, but also for servers running on premise or in other clouds. This means that you get a full visibility into the OS configuration, system level updates, installed applications, network configuration, and several other data points of your asset. AWS Config is a multi-account, multi-region data aggregation service, and this can then be used for centralized auditing and governance. In AWS Config, you create rules, and this would give you an enterprise-wide view of compliance. Using these rules, you can identify which resources are compliant and which ones are violating a rule in AWS Config. With AWS Config, you get a single dashboard to quickly spot non-compliant resources and then take action on them. AWS Config integrates seamlessly with CloudTrail as well. When you do that, you can obtain the events that invoke the change. It also integrates with AWS Systems Manager. And when you do that, you can record software changes in your EC2 instances and servers on your premise. Integration with AWS load balancers is also possible, and this is done if there are any configuration level changes to your application load balancers. AWS config works great if you got multiple accounts and then you're using AWS organizations to define your accounts. So that ways you can get that multi-account, multi-region data aggregation feature. With all these theoretical concepts in mind, let's go ahead and try to understand this better by getting into the AWS interface and taking a closer look at AWS config in action.